Hello, career competitor. This is Steve Mellor, as always, here to share with you some powerful conversation and some significant insights into what it means to optimize your career in pursuit of your optimal self. I am excited to be introducing our guest here shortly. But as always, let me draw your attention to careercompetitor.com, where you'll see right at the top of that homepage is a place where you can enter your email and become a part of my monthly subscription, my mid-monthly message, where I am just simply giving you that little nudge in the middle of the month to remember that whatever it was you set out to achieve with all that energy at the outset of the month and whatever those lofty goals may be at the end of the month, that you're not going to lose sight of that journey in between. Become a part of my community today. Head to careercompetitor.com, enter your email, and look forward to my next mid-monthly message. Now, let's get right into the show. Hello there and welcome into this episode of Career Competitor with my guest, Chuck Cooper. And Chuck is going to get the introduction he deserves here in just one moment. But amongst many things, I want you to be listening out for these three major speaking points that we have within the discussion. Firstly, Chuck covers why wisdom is minimized if we aren't willing and able to share it. Secondly, we cover why our previous successes can be the reason why we aren't hitting our current goals. And then finally, we cover the importance of rewarding ourselves on a seasonal basis. So these three things and much, much more within this great conversation with Chuck Cooper, and I hope you all enjoy. Okay, on this episode, we welcome the founder of Whitewater Consulting and a man who has dedicated over 2 decades to assisting small and mid-sized business owners in aligning leadership with their workforce. Our guest's steadfast belief in prioritizing the worth of individuals as a company's most valuable resource has fueled his dedication to nurturing trust and unity among teams spanning multi-generations. Our guest is also an author, having written the book Unprecedented: Building a Multi-Generational Business on Trust, Respect, and the Valuing of People. And when you talk about living out all areas of your life's mission, our guest has been married to his wife Debbie for 39 years, is a father of 3, and has 8 grandchildren. It's fair to say that this man keeps himself busy. I'm delighted to be welcoming in to the show Chuck Cooper. Chuck, how are we doing, brother?
I'm doing good. It's great to be with you, Steve.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for this conversation. It's been long overdue. I think I may have even asked you to reschedule at one point. And so whenever I do that, my appetite to dive in is even more so than usual. And that's saying something for a guy with my appetite. So let's just get right into it. Because for me, whenever I see someone having had a journey like yours, where you've been within an industry for a really long time, and then in the last 5 years, your consulting company now is 5 years old, you've made this decision to obviously do it your way and go it alone. And I'm curious, let's just start there with that decision to maybe transition from this world that you obviously knew very well and then make this your own venture, if you will, and finding Whitewater Consulting back then.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, because I knew several years ago, Steve, that I wanted to ultimately come back out and create my own company. Over the years, I mean, I've been a part of 6 different companies where we've had ownership roles. And so I knew that when we got to a point in the future, I wanted to launch something different. I did realize that the timing was going to happen at the moment that it did, but it was truly, there was, without question, it was the right time to do it. And ultimately, I mean, what we've done is we've taken the last 25 to 30 years of our work. We basically just rolled it up into the services that we are now offering through Whitewater Consulting, which is predominantly a business consulting practice who focuses on HR for small and mid-sized companies. So as you look at the HR umbrella, everything today from talent acquisition, talent retention, to benefits, to the question of, do I build my HR team internally or do I outsource? Those are the type of things we are getting directly involved in.
Yeah, and immediately some of the key terms that jump to mind is how you're tackling things such as engagement, such as culture, such as productivity. These are huge buzzwords out there right now. But the one thing we try to do on the show is always keep it on the individual. And the reason I say that is I would love to just dive in a little bit here, Chuck, in terms of, because having spoken to you already, I know your passion for this work. And for me, I would love to maybe get some sort of origin story here of why it is being engaged, being a part of a good culture, understanding the importance of productivity. When and why did these things become so paramount to you within your world and certainly within the work that you do?
I think when I go back over the years, I grew up in a family-owned business. And it was a small company. We just had probably, depending on the time of the year, 12 to 15 employees. But, as I was growing up, I saw the relationships that took place within that business from the employees' families, and how they connected with our family throughout the year. And I can always reflect back to the holidays and to the Christmas parties that we did as a company, and just to be able to see the joy and see the connections that took place during those times. And so as I oftentimes reflect back to those, because as I've watched companies over the years, including some of my own, we got to the place where it really became, we lost that connection, and we really became more, the employees were coming to work, doing a job, and then they were going home. But there was really nothing more than that. So there wasn't a sense of really fulfillment. There wasn't a sense of joy in that work that was being done. And so that's really, as I kind of walked this journey over the last couple of decades and watched and worked with companies, I've saw that chasm continue to grow wider and wider. And so obviously the pandemic hit in 2020. And at that point, it became a real kind of a wake-up call for companies as far as how we go about working with and how we go about leading our people. And so a lot of times I come back to, from my own personal perspective, I really am focused on making sure, that we have the right people in the company, but we're also, as a leader, and again, as the owner of a company, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of how well do I communicate to my people? How well am I able to really connect to them to bring out the best in them? Because ultimately, I think part of the joy and the work we do is being able to have a vision, a common vision, to where we are all working toward the same vision together, and we're working together as a team. And that's where I think a lot of that, the additional value of our time, we feel like we're contributing something and making a difference in not only to the company, but also into the communities that we're a part of.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing that undertone of how do you get folks to buy in and then show up in ways where they know the work they're doing it's not just for them. It goes beyond them. It has an impact far beyond them, whether it be the folks that they are directly around within the same office, whether that be in this day and age a virtual office or actually there in person. And then understanding that, hey, if they are part of an organization that is a service, that is a product of some sort, and there is an end consumer, how is the work that they're doing eventually having that end impact on the whole reason why they're there, right? Something that is outside and bigger than themselves, and how we can find fulfillment as individuals when we're able to look at things that way. And it sounds as though, just from that initial story there of you coming from your family, that was very much at the heart of your upbringing. That was always this undertone and this understanding of, hey, this isn't about the individual. It's always going to be about more than that.
It's always going to be about the people. Yeah. And I think, today when you, as we talk to business owners today, Steve, there's been such a focus over probably the last several decades where, from a business standpoint, our focus has predominantly been on profitability. And I think in today is having that balance today between profits and the focus being on your people. Mm-hmm. And I think just a quick story on how we got started with Whitewater. Again, this goes back several years ago, but when I was part of a group, there was 4 of us, that we did a canoe trip to Canada. We were gone for about 3 weeks on that trip. And as we were about the midway point, we hadn't seen anyone from the time that we launched to that day. We hadn't seen a single person. But what was really interesting was we were simply reading and using maps to be able to help us navigate the lakes and the rivers in Canada. And about the midway point, we came up to a part of the river where it appeared, based on the maps, it showed that there was 2 rapids that were ahead of us. And we basically looked at the level of the water, kind of looked at the current, and decided that rather than, at the end of the day, we felt like we could go ahead and just go through the rapids without a problem. And so we ultimately proceeded with that. We went through the first set with no issues at all. But as we approached, as we came through that first set of rapids, the water and the current typically slows down and then begins to pick up. This situation, it just stayed very, very rapid. And the further we went down the river, we began to hear this roar at the other end. And very quickly, we realized it wasn't a set of rapids, but it was actually a waterfall that we were coming up on. And as we approached that, the other guy in the boat and myself, we were paddling against each other, and the canoe had actually turned sideways. Fortunately for us, there was a gentleman in the second canoe that had been in a similar situation a few years before. And again, today I can close my eyes and I can hear his voice giving the specific instructions on what each of us needed to do to get the boat turned and to get to shore and to get out of to get to safety. And so when I got ready to launch Whitewater, that was one of the first things that, memories that came back was, one was the importance of being able to have real life experience. Second was being able to have experience and to have wisdom that you're able to take from that and being able to communicate that wisdom in a way that lands in a impactful way on your students or on your the business owners that we're working with. And that's kind of what I wanted to be able to be for my clients, is I wanted to be able to be that guide to help them navigate the journey of being an entrepreneur or a business owner, and helping them come back to really focus on the basics of valuing their people and letting their people help them accomplish the goals that they have.
Wow. That's one way to come up with the name of a company right there. I mean, talk about, so many metaphors within that, but at the same time, the fact that it was a firsthand experience and how beautifully there you're able to connect and align with that very sort of whitewater type of climate that any business can find themselves in at any point. They can feel as though, why does it feel as though we're going around in circles? Why does it feel as though you're moving this way and you're moving this way? You're paddling this way and you're paddling this way. And we've been doing that, it feels like, for so long now that we've kind of lost ourselves. And that's just one analogy that we can certainly pull from that story. But there's those two things there. I definitely want to dive a little deeper on this notion of real life experience and the importance of it. And then the notion of wisdom and most importantly, being able to communicate it. Because what good, at the end of the day, what good is wisdom if we cannot actually communicate it? So let's start with the real life experience. I'm curious, if you're speaking to a professional, if you're speaking to a business owner, let's go even more specific. If you're speaking to a business owner and you're trying to help them understand, like, listen, it can't just be your education that helps this company. There has to be some firsthand real life experience. How you may be bridging that conversation, and what might be some of the insights that you're helping that business owner just suddenly start to see, maybe for the first time, that they've maybe been unable to see up to that point?
It's really interesting whenever I start having the initial conversation with a business owner. When I sit in their office, or even if we're doing things virtual, I can see them with this, in many cases, a facade. And it appears as if they don't have really any issues. And if they do have issues, they know how to deal with that and resolve whatever that dilemma may be. And I think one of the things that I've started doing, and again, going back to real life experience, was one of the first companies that I was a part of at the ownership level. It was a hugely successful business in the first couple of years that we had it. there was a group of owners, and I include myself. I was probably the one that was most at fault for this. But at the end of the day, I let pride and ego get in the way, and actually we let success get in the way of being able to really accomplish our goals. And so we made some really, really poor decisions from a leadership perspective that ultimately ended up costing us the company. And so whenever I'm talking with a business owner, I typically am early on in that conversation, I'm leading off with, this is one of the greatest mistakes that I made as a business owner. Mm. And by doing that, literally I can see the walls begin to come down. I can see the shoulders come down, and they start to engage. And they're not just focused on the success that they've had, but they're really coming back to, all right, this person's actually been in my seat. I understand where he's coming from and understand the world that he's been in. And so from that, they start to engage and they start to open up and become a lot more transparent about what's happening within their company. And that's where I think that not only does the trust get built, but also the communication begins to really click. And from that, we're able to really identify and understand what's happening at where the rubber meets the road versus at the 30,000 foot view.
Yeah, and something you bring into our attention here as well is just the importance of any leader, any business owner to have this outside perspective at times. It doesn't have to be a daily influence, but from time to time to have somebody that can come in like yourself and have such experience in certain other areas of life and be able to actually just look at someone and say, listen, you can't see this because you're so close to it. You're in it. And I find myself time and time again, even with clients of mine, just having to emphasize that and almost helping them give themselves a little grace in those moments too.
Sure.
Because they beat themselves up and you just go, listen, it's the same. It's no different than me as a parent. Me trying to communicate with my son or my daughter. I don't know how to do that most days. And yet I can watch another parent from a mile away and be like, oh, if only they would do this, they would probably be able to, so we're all experts when we're on the outside looking in. But then when you're in the midst of it, you can't see what's right in front of you half the time or most of the time because you're in it. You're in it. And there's a separate point to that too, is you're very emotionally connected to it as well. And I'd love for you just to maybe just piggyback off the back of that thought that I've just provided there, but I'd also love for you to provide a little bit more insight around that. Success can get in the way of our goals. I mean, that is a sentence that we're going to cut from this episode and post. We're going to make that abundantly clear because I understand exactly what you're getting at. I'd love for you to help our listeners maybe further understand that very insight.
When I reflect back on that chapter of life, the one thing that I didn't have around me at all, I didn't have any coaches. I didn't have a mentor. It was basically on my own, and we were, as the ownership, we let pride and ego really take over who we were. When I look back on myself, I wasn't even the person at that point that I was before we started the process. But what really came from that, a couple of things that are really key takeaways. And one is, after I went through that, I've immediately sought help through the hiring of a couple of coaches, identifying a couple of mentors. And a couple of those guys are still with me today. And this was a situation that happened, close to probably 25 years ago. But it's been something they have served and brought so much value to me personally and also professionally, in the fact that they've served as my guardrails. So they've kind of, there are oftentimes I'll pick up a phone and call one of them and bounce an idea off of them. And they're like, no, you don't want to do that. And here's why. So even though, I'm 60 years old today, there's still a lot that I don't know. And I need to rely upon other people and other coaches and mentors to help navigate my own journey that I'm on. But being able to be transparent and being vulnerable enough to admit that and say, yes, I don't have all the answers, I think helps a person change their mindset and begin to continue to learn and to grow for the balance of their life. I look at our life as a journey. Mm-hmm. It's a journey that has a stopping point, no, without question. But I don't think we ever arrive at being the leader that we are supposed to be. We've always got to be continuing learning and growing throughout the years. So I think that's one piece. But then two, as I went through that, Steve, back on myself, is that I looked at introspectively. I didn't really have a set of values that I could connect with and really connect and not just connect with, but also to be able to live by. And so creating my own mission, vision, values, and purpose statement helped give me a lot more clarity about the person that I wanted to become. Really helped me reinforce the priorities and the objectives that I wanted for my life. And so it brought everything back to faith, to family, and then ultimately, to my work and my professional career that I would have.
I love it. And it's something that I've been blessed to really start to comprehend on a deeper level in the last almost 3 years since I started my business. And I made this shift in my life is, if we as people don't create the same mission and vision that our businesses are expected to create, we will get as lost, if not more lost, than a business that doesn't have that mission and vision. And that's really what you're getting to the heart of here is the power of that and how that can actually help you immediately just ground yourself in those moments where maybe you are caught up in the success. You've gotten to a certain point and it's all these external components of data and measurements and milestones and goals that you've hit, and you just go, look, I've got it figured out. All the stuff on this paper tells me that I've got it all figured out, and that's probably the first step towards failure. Right there is the moment you start thinking that way, and how you can use something like your mission, your personal mission, and your values, as you mentioned, as a way, just like I said, just to ground yourself, but just to remind yourself that all of that success came by relying on those very values and foundations that you now need to continue to invest in. Because to your point, Chuck, like the journey never ends, the growth never ends, the challenges never end. All of the whitewater analogy, bringing that back in, at any moment, the current can shift and things can get real ugly real quick, and you can feel completely unequipped because you allowed yourself to become almost naive to the fact that another moment like this could come your way. And here you are now in it, maybe a little less prepared than you could be had you just appreciated that at any point, this sort of thing can happen to you.
Yeah. And I think as you look, I think a lot of times when you think about that, Steve, we are so focused on, as a business owner, we're so focused on trying to keep our business, just keep it in operation and keep all the plates spinning to move the business forward. But the pace of change that we are up against right now is so much different than what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And when I look at studies today, it shows that the pace of change between now and the end of this decade will be about 4 times greater than what it is today. Wow. And if we go out another decade after that, it will be at about 16 times faster than what it is today. So as a business owner, if you sit back and say, I've got things figured out, you're going to get left behind really, really quick. Mm-hmm. So again, that's where I think the business coaches, mentors, consultants, and that outside perspective can bring so much value to that company.
Yeah, which seamlessly allows us to touch on that notion of wisdom and the power of it. But I really want to focus almost more on the importance of knowing how to communicate it. I think that's where our listeners can benefit the most from this, because there may be some folks listening to this being like, I feel like in many ways I can help so many people, but for whatever reason, they don't want to listen to me, or they don't seem to understand what it is I'm trying to get across. And that may not be because you don't have necessarily the right things to share. It just might be the approach that you're taking in order to actually share it. So I'd love for you just to provide some insights here around just the value and the importance, obviously, of that communication component when it comes to this wisdom that we maybe possess.
Yeah, I think on that, it's such an important topic, whether in life in general, obviously, from your marriage to you're at being a parent to being the business owner and being a leader, communications is such an important topic. And that, I think for me, that's one of the 5 C's of leadership for me is communication. And one of the other C's is remaining curious. So when you have that person that has a lot of wisdom to be able to share with others, the one thing that has really served me well over the years has always to remain curious. And to do that means when you're sitting down with somebody, you're asking a lot of questions. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've watched leaders over the last 4 or 5 years. One thing that has differentiated them from a lot of others has been those who are curious and who have a real desire to want to know, and they're genuine in those questions, and they're genuine in seeking that person's perspective. It allows people to be able to talk about themselves, to share stories about their own personal life, but it also opens up kind of a window into a window into who they really are as a person. Right. So no matter what kind of success that business owner's had, when you get to that level, you're at a point where you can have a real impact. And most often, they will either ask you directly for some wisdom from you, or it will at least give you the opportunity to be able to share some of your wisdom through your response. So I just think that's part of building relationships today, and being able to be empathetic with with people we're talking with.
Yeah, just simply starting with seeing that the communication is a necessity and making it a priority. Such a huge piece. I don't think any of us are born as elite communicators. Communication is like any kind of skill or any hobby or any sport that you pick up on. Like you got to be willing to get your reps. You've got to be willing to do the work and learn, and probably fail a bunch along the way. But once you're in that position of leadership, to know that the need for you to keep getting those reps, it's greater than ever before. And start small. Start on that individual basis and just make time for people and see what starts to come out of you just by, simply making that time, right?
I think one of the things that I've encouraged some of my clients to do in that situation has been to be at their business at the time that the doors open, and especially when as your employees are leaving, just to be able to be out in their area with them and be able to talk with them. Get to know them, get to know their families, but also be able to show some gratitude to them, to thank them for coming to work and for the efforts they put in today, that you really do appreciate them. And that begins to open that up to where you can start to build that relationship and communicate in a more effective way.
Yeah. It's the small deposits, right? It doesn't have to be an enormous deposit every time you communicate. It doesn't always have to be a 30-minute meeting, 1-hour thing, a coffee, a lunch. It doesn't have to be that. Sometimes it can be just that small 10, 15-second deposit of just seeing somebody, looking them in the eye and telling them that it's either good to see them or appreciate what you did today. Those things add up. This is no different than any other aspect of life. Your days are normally better when you go to the grocery store and the person who's checking out, as you leave, they maybe strike up a little bit of conversation with you, ask you how your day's going, and kind of put you in a little bit better mood, right? And those same human values that we experience on a day-to-day basis, it's no different on a professional basis as well. But the one area I'd love to just touch on here in closing is the notion of, and you touch upon it in your book, it's valuing of people. And while, again, a lot of our conversation here has been about the leader themselves and how they can maybe epitomize what it means to value their people, I'd love to just now turn it onto the individual. And I'm going to turn it right onto you, Chuck, actually. I want you to maybe speak to us and speak to our listeners here on how have you been able to do that for yourself, who you are as a business owner. And it's great that you can maybe show your clients and show those that work with you what it means to value them. But what do you do to show value towards yourself and just almost epitomize that to the person that's looking at you in the mirror?
Okay, so you bring it right back. You're putting it right back on me. Then how do I show grace and appreciation for myself?
Right. That's right.
And that is such a powerful, powerful question. And I think as I give thought to that, Steve, I think having the mission, the vision, values from a personal level, it was something that was really important to me because that really kind of defined and built some guardrails around me to where it helped hold me accountable in a lot of different areas in my life. And whenever I come up, especially whenever I've come up short, because I am without question, a driven person. And I have a lot of goals and objectives that I'm trying to accomplish each and every day. Most of the time I fail getting to get all of those complete. But at the end of the day, I've come back to the values and really looking at, again, what are my core values, and with the work that I got done today, did I accomplish the most important pieces to that? And if I did, then I will give myself, some kudos for that. The way that couple ways that I actually reward myself is actually getting up, and going in the middle of the day, especially just getting up and taking, it may be a 15-minute break, it may be an hour break, but just giving myself permission to get up and to go do something that I truly enjoy. And a part of that is just getting out into nature and just taking a walk or picking up a phone and calling a friend and just having a conversation. Those are the kinds of things that take the stress away and really allow me to really kind of get plugged back into my passion. And I think it's important to be able to reward yourself. But at the same time, when you fail, failure doesn't define you. It is just a stepping stone to success. So give yourself some grace and come back and, just never give up. Just take that next step.
Well, I'm glad that I could ask you a question from one coach to another consultant, or one consultant to a coach, that got you a little bit uncomfortable, because that's what I'm about on this show, Chuck. I want our listeners to understand that folks like yourself that have been doing what you've been doing for a long time can still feel challenged in the way in which you are pursuing your best self and holding that version of you accountable. And some of the insights there that I really want to highlight to anybody listening is the need to implement those guardrails. Those guardrails are huge, and those guardrails can allow you then to reward yourself and give you that permission that you need sometimes to walk away from your desk for 10 minutes. And some of us, we work jobs where we have a lunch break and it's insisted upon. But I would argue that can sometimes almost be a trap, that we can tell ourselves, hey, I'm having my lunch, therefore I'm clocking off, right? That I'm getting out of it. But so often we don't. So often we pull ourselves back into doing something during this time that is supposed to be for us, is supposed to be a reward. And I love how you actually put it as a reward, because there's an intentionality around that. There's a purpose around that. You don't really just walk away from your desk and see a reward laying in front of you. You have to choose, what is that reward? What am I going to reward myself with for this 10 minutes? And to your point, it's finding that person to make a call to, it's taking a walk in nature, whatever it may be. But it starts by creating those guardrails, is what I'm hearing.
It really does. Again, life is first of all, life is so short. I personally have been very guilty over the years. I wanted just to stay focused and commit to being at my desk, doing work, and ultimately becoming a workaholic. If it wasn't for my wife and for some other friends who have helped me kind of make that change, again, coming back to that, giving yourself permission and rewarding yourself, those are things that were not natural for me at all. And so it took people on from the outside to be able to help me make that change. Yeah.
Well, there's been a whole bunch of insights that you provided that come with a whole bunch of truth and reality, but none greater than your wife being right. Like that's the one. If there's any man listening to this, here's a man of almost 40 years of marriage who's here to tell you that it turns out if you listen to your wife, things might just end up the way they're supposed to end up. And
they will end up better, I promise you.
Chuck, listen, before I let you go, you've got the book, you've got a number of projects in the works. Obviously, the business is there for folks to learn about. I would just love for you to leave us any insights here in terms of the best ways to get a hold of you, or really just any other insights you think our listeners could stand to learn about you and the work that you're doing right now.
I appreciate that. And Steve, it's been great to be with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. The best way probably to get in touch with me, a couple of different options you have is, first of all, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, please reach out and connect with me. We try to provide posts 3 to 5 times a week. That's just educational, informative, to help small and mid-sized business owners and leaders as well. The other thing is my personal email is chuck@whitewaterconsulting.net. And if you would like to visit our website, please feel free to do so. That is whitewaterconsulting.net is our website for our company. The other location they can find me is my personal website, which is for our books and our podcast, which is chuckcooper.info.
Awesome. Plenty of ways to learn about Chuck, learn about Whitewater Consulting, and right back at you, Chuck. I really appreciate the time. I've really enjoyed this. I knew I would. And it's another one of those many conversations that we have on this show where, I put these 30-minute, 35-minute limits on the conversation, but I'm sure we could just do this all over again for another 30, 35 minutes. So I just appreciated the time, Chuck, and thanks again for all your insights here.
Thank you, Steve.
And a big thank you again to Chuck for joining us on this episode and for all the insights that he provided along the way. Something that I really want to point out here in closing is how he emphasized why our values and our mission must be something that we consistently remind ourselves of. When we think about how we can get lost in our previous successes, or we can get caught on this hamster wheel, let's say, of being busy and moving on to the next big important thing and not taking that time to maybe reward ourselves and giving our permission to do so. We do these things because we haven't got clear values and missions in place. If we have those things, we're always going to be reminded that there are certain elements in our world, things that mean enough to us that we truly build ourselves around, that we're always going to go back to. We're always going to remind ourselves that, hey, if I'm doing it for the right reasons, then I can become more aware that, hey, maybe I'm getting in my own way. Maybe I'm working a little too hard. Maybe it's time to just give myself a little credit and reward myself from time to time. All these things are more possible when we have that established value system, those missions in our lives that are true to our best self. So I'd love to just impart that on your way out here today, because I believe that this is something that can really be that North Star for you on your personal and professional journey. So again, my thanks to Chuck for joining us on the episode, and my thanks, as always, to you, the listener, for checking us out, for listening. If you are a new listener, I appreciate you listening this whole time and taking my insights away. But before you leave, make sure you take the time to subscribe and that you are sharing this with someone within your circle too, so they too can benefit from the power and impact of this conversation. Leave us a 5-star rating, those of you listening to us on Apple Podcasts, and I appreciate you tuning in and giving us a listen. Thanks again. Best of luck in anything and everything you've got going on. And bye for now.